Hi, everybody. I'm Parsha Becky, and welcome back to Parsha. As I'm sure you recall, we are currently in the middle of reading the third book of Chumash, the book of Vayikra. Vayikra means he called. And for the Vayikra, it's called, oh, hang on. Hello? Hello, who is it? It's Hashem calling. Hashem, who are you calling for? Hashem is calling for Moshe. Hashem, I'm going to pass the phone to Moshe. I have to get back to Parsha. I'm sorry about that. I know Hashem isn't really calling on the phone, but for the whole book of Vayikra, Hashem is calling Moshe to give instructions about the Mishkan that we just finished building at the end of the book of Shemot. This week's Parsha is called Shmini, which means eighth. And it's called Shmini, eighth, because it starts on the 8th day after the end of the 7-day process from our last Parsha. I know you have to think back a couple weeks to before Pesach. But if you remember, at the end of Parshat Tzav, Aaron and his sons took 7 days repeating a whole ritual to get ready for the job as Kohanim. This week's Parsha takes place on the very next day, the 8th day. So on the 8th day, Aaron and his sons are now ready to work as Kohanim. The Mishkan is all ready with its Kohanim, and people begin to bring korbanot to the Mishkan. They start doing their daily offerings to Hashem in the Mishkan. And things are going pretty well. But then Aaron's oldest 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu, decide to go off script. And they start doing things that Hashem did not ask for, with weird ways of using the fire and making their own stuff up in the Mishkan, getting a little bit silly. And that's not okay. There's a time and a place for doing your own thing and being a little silly. And the Mishkan is not it. And they get punished with fire from Hashem, and they pass away. And Aaron is understandably very upset. And Moshe actually comes to Aaron after and says, "Hey, Aaron, why didn't you eat the rest of the sacrifices for the day, the meat the Kohanim were supposed to eat?" And Aaron's like, "Excuse me, Moshe, if I ate that now when I'm not thinking about Hashem, I'm thinking about how upset I am about my kids. Do you think that would be okay with Hashem? You think that would be better than me just not eating it?" And then Moshe's quiet. Moshe realizes that Aaron is right. And Moshe says, "I'm sorry, Aaron. You did the right thing. I'm sorry for questioning you, and I'm very sorry for your loss." And Aaron is quiet, and Moshe tries to comfort Aaron. Moshe tells Aaron, Hashem is sanctified through people like your children. They made a mistake. That doesn't make them bad people. And Hashem is closer with them now. And Aaron doesn't say anything. And afterwards, Hashem has a new rule for Kohanim. Hashem says Kohanim are not allowed to drink wine or any alcohol before going to do their work in the Mishkan, because wine can make people act a little bit silly, and there's a time and a place for being silly, but the Mishkan is not it. The Mishkan is a place where we need to be very serious, where we need to be really focused and thinking about Hashem, or things will go wrong. Right now, the Parsha is kind of on a downer note. So let's cheer things up with something that makes everybody happy: food. The Parsha continues with rules about which animals are kosher to eat, divided up into categories based on how and where they move. So starting with animals that walk around on the land, we've got a couple rules. The animals that walk around on the land to be kosher, they have to have hooves instead of hands or paws. They can't just be any kind of hooves. They have to be split hooves, so there's like a crack going down the middle of the hoof. And they have to be also animals that chew their cud, which means they chew their food, goes into their stomach, goes into their mouth, they chew it again, goes into their stomach. Like for humans, that would be super gross. But for other animals, it's super normal. Like cows have 8 stomachs. Chew their food, it goes into a part of the stomach, another stomach, into part of their mouth. They chew it up again, it goes into another stomach, and so on. That's just how their digestive system works. So they need a digestive system like that, where they chew their cud, and they also need to have split hooves. It's not either or, it has to be both for it to be a kosher land animal. Next, for animals that swim in the water, which again, not limited to fish, any kind of creature that moves and lives mainly by swimming around in the water, it has to have fins that help it swim around, and its entire body has to be coated in scales. Again, it's not either or. They need the fins and the scales to be a kosher water animal. Next, for animals that fly in the air, and note, we are not saying birds, we are saying animals that fly in the air. Any animal that moves primarily by flapping its wings. Any animal that moves primarily by flapping its wings to fly in the air, we don't have a rule this time, we have a list. The Torah gives us a list of 19 flying creatures that are not kosher. If it's on the list, we cannot eat it. And any animal that moves primarily by flapping its wings and flying in the air that is not on the list is kosher. Now, again, I'm being very careful about the terminology here that it moves by flapping its wings. I'm not saying birds, both because that's the terminology that the Torah is actually making use of, and also because one of the creatures on the list of flying creatures is a bat. A bat is not a bird. A bat is a mammal, which moves primarily by flapping its wings and flying in the air. It is not kosher because it is on the list. On the other hand, animals such as chickens, they flap their wings. They are not on the list, which is why chickens are kosher. Moving along, the fourth category of animals are creepy crawlies, animals that crawl and slither and skitter. And sometimes they have wings, but they mostly kind of like, they're very low to the ground. And they move along, crawling, skittering, slithering, flying on the ground. Creepy crawlies. We have a list and a rule. Now, first we have, the rule is the only creepy crawlies that are kosher are ones with 4 jointed legs, with knees that bend, that they use for hopping around. But let there be no mistake, the Torah says, there are only 4 creatures in this category. I will give you a list. The list are grasshoppers, locusts, bald locusts, and crickets. Those are the only 4 creepy crawlies. Any other creepy crawlies are not kosher. And if you're not sure whether it's a grasshopper, locust, bald locust, or a cricket, you check. Does it have 4 jointed legs that it uses for hopping? If it does, it's one of those probably. If it doesn't, it is not kosher. That is the end of Parshat Shmini. Shabbat Shalom, and I will see you next week.